Hey, are you a six-figure female entrepreneur or just about there? Well, congratulations. That's a great achievement. But I know you're not done. You're ready to achieve the next dimension in your life and your business. And that's going to require you to conquer your fears and self-doubt, gain clarity and focus, increase your visibility, get strategic and intentional, and take massive action to execute on your goals. Now, does any of this resonate with you? Yes, I hear some of you saying, yes, this sounds like me, but if I knew how to do all of that, I would have done it already. Well, I hear you. Listen, you're not alone, and I have the solution for you, but you have to take the first step. See, what I know is that women like you are not content to sit on the sidelines and just wait for things to happen. Nope, you go get what's yours. So if you're truly ready to do what it takes to reach the next dimension in your life and your business, then I want you to join me for my free live stream masterclass and learn the 5 key elements badass female entrepreneurs must leverage to conquer self-doubt, increase their visibility, and execute on their goals so they can live life unapologetically AF. So now it's your turn. You have to take the first step. So reserve your spot now. All you have to do is go to bibmasterclass.com. That's B as in boy, Y, B as in boy, B as in boy, masterclass.com. Remember, it's free. Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast, where we empower women to connect authentically, build strategically, and live life unapologetically AF. It's time for women to embrace that they are powerful at their core and to leverage their expertise, resources, and relationships to build their business, their brand, and their badassery. I'm your host, Kelly Charles Collins, and we invite you to subscribe to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. Our episodes drop every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern. So listen, enjoy, share, and subscribe. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. Today's going to be an interesting episode because it's one of the things that caused me to start Ladies Who Leverage. And so I'm going to share that with you as Monica talks to us today. But let me introduce Monica so we can get started. So Monica Parkin is and Monica, did I say your last name right?
It's Parkin, but that's okay. It's all good. It happens.
Now we got to say it right. Monica Parkin is a mortgage broker, an award-winning international speaker, and the author of Overcoming Awkward, an introvert's guide to networking, marketing, and sales. When she first started out as an entrepreneur, her shyness prevented her from attending networking events, but she has since transformed into a master relationship builder. And she's here to tell us a bit more about that journey and how the skills she's learned are available to everyone. So Monica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm really excited to be here today.
So before we get into the brilliance that you are right now around networking, give us a little bit about your background, your education, and your work background, and what brought you to wanting to talk about this subject and help people.
Yeah, so I was kind of a solopreneur for years where I just lived in my own little bubble and very, very introverted, anxious. Honestly, I would just drop my kids off at the curb at school because I didn't want to have to go talk to the other moms. I wouldn't let them out play dates, go on play dates, because that meant I'd have to have the other kids over to my house. That means I'd have to talk to the other, I would do everything I could to avoid, to the point where I wouldn't even talk to the clerk at the grocery store. I get mad if they do that thing where they read your card and say, "Hello, Mrs. I'd be like, "Don't talk to me, man. Don't talk to me." And so I had this, we bought a new house and I had this experience with a mortgage broker, and by some fluke, it was all virtual. It was email. I literally never, and I thought, what a great career for me. I can just be in my own little bubble. I can hang out at home. Well, I didn't get the memo that apparently that's not what mortgage brokers do. And I was a total one-off experience. So I did the education, I took the course, I'm all ready to start my new job. And they're like, "So when are you going to bring some clients in? What's the first networking thing you're going to do?" And I was like, "What? What are you talking about? That's not why I got this job. I got the job so I can stay home and hang out with my dog. What is this all about?" So that's where this journey began.
Yeah. I know, it's so interesting that you say that, because one of the reasons that I started Ladies Who Leverage is because of my thoughts around networking, right? And the whole idea of, no, I need to go up and talk to somebody and I need to be finding, I just don't like it. I'm a true ambivert, right? So I can be extroverted and speak in front of thousands of people, teach anybody, it doesn't bother me. Put me in a networking space where it's like, yeah, here's this room. And I think, and tell me if this is the same for you too, or was the same for you. I think it's just a whole notion that I've been put in this place to network.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself just brings on a whole bunch of like, no, I don't want to be here.
It did. Yeah. And my work actually made it easy for me. They're like, there's going to be a Chamber of Commerce meeting next week. You can come with us. It'll be great. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm out. Like, I'm tapping out. I'm quitting this career. And then I thought about it and I'm like, okay, that's a little dramatic. Like, you should give this a try. So I showed up at this event and of course, none of my colleagues are there yet. So I'm like a fish in a bowl out of water. Like, I don't know where to stand, how long to make eye contact. Like, where do I put my hands? Like, how long is too long to talk? Did I stand at the appetizer table? Like, I was just freaking out, turned around, went back out to my car and just sat there until someone showed up that I knew, because I just I couldn't do it. I couldn't stay in that room. I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing and how I was supposed to do it. And, obviously I got through that event, but I realized that that's not how I want to network. That's not, and I love that term ambivert, because I'm a lot like you. I actually really enjoy speaking and teaching, but put me in a room with 50 people. I'm better than I used to be, but it's still it's a struggle for me. It's not my natural environment.
Yeah. What do you think it is about that though? So for those of us, for people who get into that space of networking, and you're looking for the exit, right? I'm the same way. I'm like, where's the exit, or where's the one person that I know? And I'm just going to go talk to that person and follow that person around. What do you think it is about that environment? And do you think it's different for women than men?
Oh, that's a good question. Two questions there. So one, what I figured out what it used to be about that environment is I was trying to be someone I wasn't. I was trying to be who I thought everyone thought I should be. When I stopped being that person, like for me as an introvert, if I'm pretending to be someone I'm not, like I'm this great mortgage broker, not that I'm not a great mortgage broker, but you know what I mean? If I'm pretending, then all these other windows are open in my brain, right? Like, because you're basically telling a lie and you're trying to remember all the details and you're trying to hold it all together and also have a conversation. If I just show up authentically me, be a little vulnerable, be a little quirky, like this is who I am, I don't have all those windows open. I can just be me. And then the other piece is, if I'm just talking about myself, I don't get anything out of it. They don't get anything out of it. If I stop and I use the other skill set, which is listening, ask good questions, listen deeply, hear the responses, that's networking. That's where relationships are built. And that's ultimately what networking is. It's building relationships. And if you're just talking and not listening, then you're not building a relationship.
Yeah. The thing I think that for me, I will say this for me, that when I get into those spaces, I don't like small talk. So it's very hard for me to just talk about nonsense or what I consider to be fluff and nonsense and to be, just passing out business cards. And so for me, when I get into those spaces, similarly to what you were just saying in terms of your brain is opened up and you have all these things, I'm thinking, okay, well, what do I like? How do I have like what I consider to be a nonsensical conversation? And I think that was a struggle for me in terms of how to, because I just want to have a real conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so, people are like, oh, you got to find out this about the person first. And you got to find out that, no, I just want to talk about, I want to talk to them. And I don't necessarily, want to engage in these long conversations around their dog and their family and, all of that stuff, which is not that you're not interested. But I think to what you just said in terms of going in there authentically, and figuring out what that means for you, right? Being authentic and operating from that space. I think that is something that's helpful.
Yeah. And being really curious about people, right?
Mhm.
Rather than focus on talking about yourself and what you have to offer. And I hate small talk too. Like I absolutely hate it. I can't even come up, like if I'm in an elevator for 2 minutes, I don't even know what I'm supposed to say.
Right.
But now when I get to a networking event, I will say, so what inspired you to create this business? Like what's missing in your business? why do you do this? What are you passionate about? Like, ask the deep questions, and then you get right through the fluff and you get to the really cool stuff. And that's the conversations that I love to have. And honestly, most people appreciate that because that's a conversation they want to have too.
Yeah. And the conversation that, you know, that they don't usually get when you're at these events, right? So you're walking into these spaces, and I think even, you know, for those who are, I think even for those who are extroverted in those spaces, I think for them, they would like to have some of those deeper conversations, but we're so conditioned to being in these spaces and kind of like, oh, let's, you know, have this, you know, this little banter and this fluff around stuff, when, you know, the questions that you just asked, you know, what inspired you to start the business, those types of things that people will be like, oh, okay, now I can really share. Because if I ask you what inspired you, I will learn so much more about you.
All of a sudden your inner light comes on and you start shining, right?
Right. And you start having the conversation. So even the things that we consider to be kind of small talk will come up in those spaces, but it's not the focus of, you know, that's not what you lead with, right? So that you can get more information from them. So for you, Monica, so you had this experience, right? Going to this networking event.
Yeah.
How long did it take you? Because, you know, if you're an introvert, you're an introvert, but how long did it take you to, not even, I won't even say overcome, but kind of move through, right, those kinds of challenges that you had as an introvert in a networking space to being this master relationship builder? And then we're going to talk about like what happened in between, but what was that length of time?
I'm going to say, like, nothing happens overnight, right? I'm going to say it was probably at least 18 months. Like it was a slow, gradual process. I kind of describe it to people sometimes like you plant a seed and then all of a sudden one day you go in your garden, there's like a full grown plant. That's what it felt like. Like I didn't see the change. All of a sudden I woke up one day and I was like, wow, I'm looking forward to that event. And I'm actually going to go early because that's usually where the best conversations are. And I know there's going to be someone there that's terrified and I'm going to go talk to them. And I was like, well, when did that happen? Like, and then I had to backtrack and figure out how it actually happened. And there was a real process to it. I just didn't realize it as much in the time that I was doing it.
Right. So talk to us about that process. What was that? I mean, what happened? What did you learn? Did someone teach you? Did someone inspire you? What was that process over time?
Yeah, with two things. So one, I started thinking about other times when I really had to make a big shift in my life and like how I'd done that. And it not so much fake it till you make it, but I kind of had to tell myself a different story. So I decided if I keep talking to myself about how much I hate this, I'm just going to keep hating it. Like I need to change this internal dialogue. So I thought I'm just going to give it a week. I'll give it a try. I'm going to pretend that I like this stuff. So I'm like, I like people. I'm going to enjoy talking to people today. Something great is going to happen. Because I was thinking about, you know, like coffee, you know, when I first started drinking coffee, I hated it. But 2 weeks after drinking it every day is my new favorite thing. I'm like, maybe if I can just pretend for a while, I'll like it. So you know, that example, the grocery store, where normally I would get really mad if the clerk talked to me. She said something and I was like, I almost didn't talk to her. And I was like, no, remember this morning you said you liked people. You're going to like people today. And so I answered her and I found out something was on sale. And then my brain did this thing where it was like, okay, you did it. Something good happened. This is cool. And then I got curious about the next time, right? And the next time, and every day I just kind of added a few new experiences. And then I come home at the end of the day and like look for evidence, like, did this work out? Did something good? And every day something cool came out of it. And so I started to actually look forward to more interactions because my brain had kept track and realized that cool things were happening and wanted more of it.
Yeah. You know, one of the things, I mean, that you're bringing up is the whole issue around mindset and, you know, what we think reflects in how we speak, how we act, how we do the things. And so, you know, I still have a dread around going to networking. So I'm gonna have to change my mindset around that and change the conversation in my head around that. But that's so very important because, and to attach something to it is almost like what I'm hearing you say is almost like risk reward, right? So the risk you were taking was, I am going to come out of who I am as an introvert and speak to somebody because there's a reward on the other end, or there's potentially a reward on the other end. And so if you're somebody like that, who's into, that kind of balancing and cost benefit analysis, then I think that's a great way to think about it. Like, what is the benefit of me coming out of this, shell, or coming out of, or changing my mindset around this particular thought process? How will that benefit me on the other side?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not going to say that I still love networking events, but I definitely am way more comfortable with them. Something else, that very first networking event. So I went out to the car, and then my colleague showed up. So I went inside, and then I was like, you're just going to have to do this. So I did like what I thought was networking, right? So I went around, I talked to everyone. I got the best rate. I gave my business card, like, what can I sell you? It was all about me. Then I got home at the end of the day, and I'm looking at this handful of cards, right? And I'm like, what am I going to do with these things, right? So I throw them in the garbage. And then as I'm throwing them in the garbage, like this light bulb goes on in my head, and I'm like, I'm throwing out their cards.
They're throwing out
my cards. Like, whatever I just did there, it did nothing for me. I didn't build a single relationship. I didn't make a connection. Like, I've got to do something totally different than this. This is not going to work for me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting that you were saying that, like, oh, I'm throwing out their cards. They're likely throwing out, my business cards. And I always call it business card bingo. We're always like, oh, give me your card, give me your card. And then, like you just said, if you don't have a meaningful conversation with the person, or if you're just talking about yourself, then you get those cards and you get back and you're like, I don't even know who this person is. I don't even know why I would need to keep the business card, right? As opposed to throwing it away. And so once you got that realization, how did that impact the way that you, looked at networking, or, took on the next event that you had to go to?
Yeah. So twofold. So the next thing I did is I started doing all this like I was buying leads, I was taking out ads, I was doing all this stuff, and like nothing was happening, nothing. Putting all this business content on my social media, like nothing. So I reached out to some women in my industry. We have this thing called Women in the Mortgage Industry, and it's for women that are already really doing well, mentor other women. So, I called the first one. I said, like, what do I got to do? Is there a better lead to buy? Is there better advertising, better keywords? And they're like, no, you just need to be you. And I was like, I'm so mad. Like, why do people say this? And then I call the next one, and she's like, yeah, you just need to be yourself. And I was, again, like, this is stupid. She doesn't want me to succeed, obviously. Like, this is what we tell little children. But then when the third one said that to me, I was like, okay, maybe there's something to this, right? And so I thought, well, I'm going to just try it. So here's the thing about me. Like, I'm this crazy goat lady. I live on a little farm. I got a whole bunch of miniature goats. So I started putting that out there, right? Like, I'm a crazy goat lady, and here's who I am, and being a little bit vulnerable and saying, like, yeah, I'm a little nervous about this event. I'm going to it. I'm freaked out. If anyone else is freaked out, like, meet me at the bar and we'll chat. Like, and once I got vulnerable, it made space for all these other people to be vulnerable too. And like, magic started to happen. Like, I started connecting with people started reaching out to me. I started to build relationships without trying, because I wasn't pretending to be someone I wasn't spamming people with business, but business came back from that, even though it wasn't all business, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I think even for the people that you're trying to contact, because we're in these spaces and we see all these people, and if you're the person who is, the quiet person, the person who's looking for the exit, we see other people talking, we just immediately assume that they're all, so comfortable in their own skin and comfortable being in that space, and they're not necessarily comfortable either. And so, it is just about, like, how can I show up as my authentic self and use that to create these types of connections. And as you said, creating those connections will help you to generate business, right? So it's not just all about talking. I want to say something to you though, before we keep going. We talked about the goats. So have you done goat yoga?
I have not. I keep hearing about it though.
So this is our new magazine, Ladies Who Leverage, and the founder of Goat Yoga, Lainey Morse, wrote an article about how the idea around goat yoga came to be. So I think that that's so interesting that you were talking about, you're the goat lady. So
and when the light bulb came on and I knew it was working, because I've been posting these things about me and my goats or whatever. And then so one day I draw and my tagline is Mortgage Monica. So even though I'm not posting about business, it always says Mortgage Monica. So I dropped the little baby goats off at the vet to get their vaccines and stuff. And I had to be somewhere. So I came back an hour later and they're like, 3 people saw these and asked if they're Mortgage Monica's goats. Like, so even though I hadn't talked about business, people had connected like that thing about me with my business. They knew who I was
right.
and who they were. And yeah, it's really cool.
And as we're talking about the difference, and some people, I think let's just give everybody, because we've been talking about this and saying these words, but maybe some people listening or watching are not really clear on what we're talking about in terms of who is an introvert, or what does it mean to be an introvert as opposed to an extrovert. So is that something you could, help us understand and help people understand, so that as they're listening, they have the context?
I hope I can. Yeah, I don't have the dictionary definition.
That's all right.
I'll tell you, there's introverts and extroverts in my family, right? So when the pandemic hit, the introverts in my family were like, this is awesome. This is the best thing ever. I mean, truly not, because I don't mean that in a,
right.
I don't mean the light of tragedy, inside. But in terms of having to isolate and stay home, the introverts in my family were like, yeah, we've been training all our life for this. This is awesome. And the extroverts in my family were just climbing the walls. Like, I got to talk to someone. I got to get out there. And so I think introverts, one is they're very deep thinkers. They're deep listeners. They're happy to spend time with themselves. When they build relationships, they're usually pretty deep relationships. And they get exhausted actually by too much social contact. They need to come home and recharge. Even if they like social contact, it's like this battery that depletes very quickly. So they get their energy from being alone. Extroverts, on the other hand, get their energy from other people. So my son, after the pandemic, sort of wound down a bit, and he was able to go out. He came home and he's talking a mile a minute, and he's like vibrating. I'm like, what are you, taking drugs or something? Like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, I haven't seen people for 2 years. This is the best day of my life. So he was getting energy from that. My introvert daughter had to go out and interact, and she's like, I'm exhausted, I'm going to bed. Like, so just the way that energy, I think, plays out is a big part of that.
Yeah. And some people are, and some people are introverts, some people are extroverts. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you, anything about you. It's just the way in which you are able to communicate with people or be engaged with other people. And like I was saying, for me, I call myself an ambivert because I am an introvert in certain situations, right? And I love being in the house by myself. I love being in my own space by myself, but I also like being out and speaking and teaching and being around lots of people, right? But being around, and it's interesting, being around lots of people though, at almost like at a distance, right? Because I don't like being in closed spaces or lots of people, like concerts and stuff. I don't like that. If I'm on the stage and the people are out there, right, that's fine for me. So I think it's a really interesting dynamic, and for people to understand where people are on the spectrum, because I think it will help better with communication, the ability to build relationships. And I know that, you wrote a book about this, and you talk about yourself in terms of being a master relationship builder. So talk about that. Talk about being an introvert who in fact is a master relationship builder, because for some people it may seem that it's inconsistent, which I don't think it is, but it may seem inconsistent for some people.
Yeah. I actually just wrote an article about this, but the like introverts actually have this super relationship building power. They're just, we don't see it, because when we see extroverts who also are, by the way, amazing relationship builders. So you're right. There's a spectrum, and one isn't better than the other. It's this really symbiotic relationship, and workplaces and companies actually need about 50% of each to really function well. They play different roles in their tribe, and they're both really important roles. And I've lost what you asked me. Talk about real life. I got off on a tangent. Now I don't remember the question.
Now you think I remember what I No, talking about the fact that as an introvert, you were saying that as an introvert, you're a master relationship builder. Right. And so for some people, it may seem that that's an inconsistency.
Yeah. For sure. It does seem like an inconsistency, I think, because when we think about relationship building, we think about that traditional walking around, shaking hands, being the loudest voice in the room, being heard. And there's a million ways to build relationships. And I think extroverts build them sort of maybe 10 at a time. They build them and like they can stand in a group and build a bunch of relationships, whereas introverts really do that one at a time in a very individual way. So I kind of feel like I'm a farmer. I plant little seeds and then I watch them grow, right? I'm planting seeds every time I meet someone, whereas introvert is like throwing seeds out there. But it's not a race, right? There's that tortoise and the hare thing. You both get to the finish line just in your own different way.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk a little bit about your book. So the name of your book is Overcoming Awkward, an Introvert's Guide to Networking, Marketing, and Sales. What caused you to write the book and what is the focus of the book?
Yeah. So what caused me to write it was I was laying in bed one Saturday afternoon and I saw this 30-day writing challenge and it was the middle of the pandemic. And I'm like, wow, I don't have a half an hour commute in the morning and the afternoon. I can do this. And so I did. And I am a little bit ADHD also. So long-term projects are hard for me, but short-term projects, my kids were like, Mom, 30 days, you can probably knock this off. If it was a year, no, but 30 days, you can probably do it. So that's what it sparked the desire to do it. And then as part of this 30-day project, the first assignment they asked you is what's an obstacle you've overcome in your life, because that's what you need to write about. And when I started really thinking about that, I thought, yeah, this is my obstacle. I've been that awkward person since as long as I can remember. Like I was a kid in school that didn't know how to talk to people, that didn't have friends, that, my whole life it's been something I struggled with. And now I don't struggle with it anymore. And I thought, what a gift to give other people to share that experience and that journey so that they feel like they can make that journey if they want to also.
Yeah, because it's so important, right? Relationships are the key to everything, whether you're an employee or whether you are a business owner. That is such a huge part of your success. And so being able to build relationships is so important. And do you think, Monica, that in that type of relationship building, do you think it's harder for a female introvert versus a male introvert?
That's a good question. I can only answer that as a female. I do see male colleagues that are introverts, and I would say maybe it's a little easier for them. Maybe there's just that male tribe and there's some of those things that they do together, their golf or whatever they do where they can form those bonds. But I just don't feel super qualified to speak to that question, to be honest. I haven't sat in on that side of the fence, but I imagine there are differences and I'd love to actually, maybe that's book number 2. Maybe I need to speak to a male introvert and find out what those differences are.
I think even just in networking in general, that women are conditioned differently. And we've been taught so many different things as, young girls and how we're supposed to, behave in conversations. And obviously, as we get older and we learn more, we change those things. But there's still sometimes those roles, right? Those gender expectations when you go into networking. And from my experience, what I've always felt is that, the men go in there, like people could be having a conversation, a group of people, and men would just come on in, right? They just come into the conversation. They just start talking. They don't care who's talking, right? And whereas women in those same situations kind of wait our turn.
And you're right, because when you look back at the way we talk to little girls and the way we talk to little boys, or maybe we do that less now, but little girls, it's always, oh, wow, you're being so nice and quiet and well behaved. And don't you look pretty? And oh, what great manners you have. And boys, it's like, yay, you did so good in that race. And oh, you're being a boy, and yeah, it is a different sort of conditioning. So we are conditioned to be quiet and be polite and not rock the boat and maybe hide our authentic selves a little bit, maybe be who we think people want us to be. And maybe that barricade isn't there as much for our male counterparts.
Yeah. And I think, the whole thing around being polite and being ladylike, and obviously, these are generalizations. Not everybody acts in this manner, whether you're male or female or however you identify in this world. So, those are generalizations, but in my experience of just watching, especially as a lawyer and going to events and watching, you see how like the males come in. And I think, in some ways, people who you think are introverted men, but like you said, they've been conditioned to just be, like just go for it And for us, it's like almost like wait your turn, right? And so when you're in this conversation, we won't necessarily just barge into a conversation. And so I think that is something that when you say, being able to build those relationships, I think some of that comes into play in terms of how well we do at that.
Although on the flip side, I was talking to a man the other day who actually, it's a really tragic story. His ex-girlfriend was murdered by her ex-boyfriend. And so he's kind of made his life purpose teaching men to be in touch with themselves. And what he said is one of the things about men is they've been taught to push those feelings down, to not feel emotions, and that you can't selectively numb emotions, right? So if you push down the sad stuff, you can't feel the joy. And it kind of made me think that in one way, how women have these deep, intense relationships with women where you can share your emotions, you can be vulnerable. I think sometimes men are missing that part of it. Sometimes maybe their experience is a little more shallow and they're missing that deep connection sometimes because of that.
They do talk about that in terms of like when they talk about serial killers. And most serial killers being men, and that almost like the shutting off of their ability to feel. Right. And that's what allows them to be in that space. I used to be a criminal defense attorney.
Interesting. Yeah. Because I had asked him, I said, why don't you change the law instead? Why are you focusing on, men? And he said, well, emotionally connected men don't usually kill people. Like, that's something I can control. I can't really, the law is too big for me. Like, but this is something I can impact people with. So we're off on a tangent now, but it was just really cool, that conversation that I had with him. It really touched me.
Yeah. So let's go back. And if somebody is an introvert, right? So male, female, the person is an introvert and needs to go to their next networking event and they want to be successful. What is a piece of advice that you would give to them?
Yeah, a couple. So one that we already talked about, right? Just be you, be yourself, show up as you. Don't try to sell something. 2, be curious, ask good questions, ask really deep questions. 3, look, where can you be of service to the people in that group, right? Is there one person in that group that you could connect to another person? Because when you build those connections for other people, instead of showing up and going, where am I going to get business? Like, how can I help Mary connect to Kelly? Because they could have a great conversation. How can I help someone else grow their business? I use kind of this neighborhood analogy, right? It doesn't matter if I live in a beautiful home, my yard is immaculate. If my neighborhood's falling apart, my community is falling apart, then my house value goes down, right? It's the same thing with my business. It doesn't matter how great my business model is. If I'm not supporting my fellow entrepreneurs, if I'm not building my own industry, if I'm not helping the other people out there, like, my business tanks, right? So go there with the intent, like, how can I be of service to other people here? Who can I help? How can I grow? And then someone uses this phrase for me once, is the ear to mouth ratio. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listen twice as much as you talk. And really, like, you can't go wrong with that strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause then it's really interesting because in that listening, you also hear, sometimes we're thinking, what if I'm doing that? If all I'm doing is talking about them and like listening to them, right? Who's going to be listening to me? Hopefully there are people listening to you, but in listening to, what they need, how you can be supportive of them, just in talking to them and in having that conversation, they will also see the value that you have, right? So that conversation, that exchange of information allows both people to actually understand how valuable they are to each other.
Yeah. And people notice people who notice them, right? Like, if someone leaves me an amazing review or they drop me a note and say, oh, I heard you the other day, I loved it. Like, I immediately want to go do something for them. I want to support their business. But if they just come at me like, hey, can you do this thing for me? It just feels yucky. Like, it feels yucky. And you think that by listening, you're not doing anything, but really, truly, people notice the people that notice them. So get out there, notice other people, celebrate what they're doing. And like, that comes back to you. People see that and they want to be a part of that. And they want to be around that.
Absolutely. People notice people who notice them. I love that. That is tweetable. That is tweetable. So Monica, for your book, how can people find your book?
Yeah. So it's a Kindle paperback on Amazon, and I actually just recorded the Audible. It's the #1 new release in its category for the last 2 weeks, so it's doing really well. And yeah, those are the 3 places to get it. You can also just go on my website if you want to order a copy directly from me, but there's it's really easy to find.
That's awesome. So what is your website if someone wanted to connect with you?
It's monicaparkin.ca.
And it's PIRKIN, and we'll make sure that you have all of the links so that you can get in contact with Monica and also order her book and learn how you can overcome awkward so that you can network, market, and sell like a pro. And, you know, we're talking about introverts and that this came about because Monica was an introvert, but I am sure that the lessons in that book apply to anyone. We can all do better, right?
I have heard feedback from people that bought it as an extrovert to help out their introverted friends. And one, they're like, I've actually become kind of an introvert through this pandemic, so it was helpful. And B, they said there's actually lots of stuff in there that just applied to life in general, not just a business, and that they found it really helpful.
Yeah, because, you know, relationship building is across the board. It's not just, we talk a lot about business on, you know, Ladies Who Leverage podcast, but it's not just about business. It is about life. How do you build those relationships in your personal life too? So Monica, thank you so much for being on the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. I really and truly appreciate it. Everyone, make sure that you go to Amazon to find Monica's book. And also make sure that you are in contact with her on her website. And like she said, notice people. People notice people who notice you. So make sure that you are out there noticing each other. And if you see someone doing well, doing something good, you know, just say, hey, I see you, right? Because that's really important. So again, thank you all for watching and listening. Those of you who are just listening to the podcast, make sure that you subscribe. We drop our new episodes every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And for those of you who are female entrepreneurs and you are looking to build your business badassery, so you want to make sure that you are being a strategic badass in your business so that you can build not just a business, a thriving business, and be able to live life unapologetically AF, I would invite you to apply to join our global network and mentoring accelerator. And you can do that by going to lwlcollab.com. That's LWLCOLLAB as in boy.com. And until next time, unleash your badassery and live life unapologetically AF. Take care. Thank you for joining us. This podcast has been brought to you by Lady Lawyer Media. Make sure that you subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if you are a female entrepreneur or business owner and you're looking for a safe, supportive ecosystem to create and share ideas and information, build a thriving business, and live life unapologetically AF, then I'd invite you to apply to Ladies Who Leverage. We're an exclusive community of badass female entrepreneurs. So if that sounds like you, go to www.lwlcollab.com. That's LWLCOLLAB as in boy.com so that you can apply to join us in our amazing badass network. And until then, I want you to unleash your badassery and live life unapologetically AF.